Hello, and welcome to the Arizona Civics Podcast. In this podcast, we will share our journey of sustaining Arizona's interest in reforms to civics by collaborating with civic educators in our state and nationwide. This important work is being spearheaded by the Center for American Civics at Arizona State University. I'm Liz Evans, Civic Education Program Director at ASU, and your host for this podcast. I will interview teachers, content experts, and civic education leaders throughout our episodes, providing valuable insights and perspectives. We hope you enjoy joining us on this journey to make Arizona a national civics model. Welcome back, everybody, to the Rebuilding Arizona Civics Podcast. I am very excited today. So we're going to be spotlighting 4 teachers. And our first one is Maria James. Maria, I'm going to have you introduce yourself, kind of let our listeners know what you do, and then we're going to talk about the lesson that you and 2 other educators created.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Maria James. I'm currently the Elementary Social Studies and Science Specialist in Mesa Public Schools. So I've had that role for a couple years now. Before that, I was a Title I School Improvement Specialist, so really worked with the teachers and coaching and found out a lot of the needs that are going on with teachers in the schools. And then before that, I was a teacher for about 12 years in elementary and then preschool before that. So I have a lot of experience in education. And then I got involved with the work with EAD. I really fell in love with it. I think it was during the pandemic, actually. And I started to watch some of the podcasts that were going on and listen to them, and then started to watch some of the webinars that were going on. And it was just really moving to see that civics was re-engaging us and coming back to life in our classrooms in such a positive way. So that is a little bit about me.
And I'm excited to talk to you because I think a lot of times when we talk about elementary school, right, it is teachers are they have so many things, so many requirements of them with testing and all this other stuff that sometimes social studies just falls to the wayside. And so I love that your job is social studies and science in elementary school. Can you walk me a little bit through, we've talked about inquiry, especially with 3rd graders. And I'm sure listeners right now are like, oh, you can't do that stuff with 3rd graders.
Sure.
Prove them wrong. Because I know you can. But how does this look in elementary social studies classrooms?
Absolutely. Well, the really cool thing is we know that kids, especially little kids, ask hundreds of questions a day. And we also know that as they get older, they stop asking questions. And there was a lot of studies that were done to find out kind of why that is. And yes, one could say, well, they're older, they know more now. But really, think of us and how much we know and how many questions we could still ask at our age. And somewhere along the way, that just asking questions gets squashed. And a lot of it does have to do with traditional schooling. Not intentionally done to squash little kids' inquiry, but that's what happens in traditional schooling. And so we know that those kids still have that innate ability to ask questions and to want to know things. And so the social studies standards here in Arizona fit exactly with inquiry. Inquiry is built into the heart of our standards. We can see that when we look at our skills of processing standards, that you don't have to try to fit it in. It's in our standards. And so inquiry lives there. And it's a great connection with ELA. So I think that when we're looking at social studies, we really want students to be able to start asking questions about what happened in history. Why are things like that? What happened during this time? Why? What? When? All those sort of wonderful questions, and really start to dig deep and find out what are they interested in and what do they want to know. And when we were looking at 3rd grade especially, I think that was a really great place to start. Because our standards changed and we had all of this curriculum that 4th grade teachers used to teach about Arizona now get moved down to 3rd grade. And so those 3rd grade teachers were kind of starting with a blank slate because that's not what they had taught before. And so that was a great time to say, these kids live in Arizona. This is all about Arizona. What do they want to know? What are they missing? And kind of go from there. So it was a really easy fit to include inquiry and to be able to start with 3rd grade.
And I love in your writing, and listeners, there is a corresponding blog post. So if you go to rebuildingazcivics.com, there will be a piece. But one of the pieces as I was going through this is you said cultivating inquiry really allows students to build empathy and realize the multiple perspectives that all people bring to history and civics. And I read that and I was like, yes, it's such a powerful thing. So I'd like to ask, when we talk about including multiple perspectives, what is one of the things in your lesson that you really try to include?
Sure. So in our lesson, we really try to include primary sources. We thought that including those primary sources about the time periods that we were discussing really helped the students to see what was happening then. So a lot of times when we're talking about things that happened in the past, it's hard for students to put themselves back then because they weren't back then. So what you want to do is really hear from the people and see the pictures and images and stories that were from that time period. So we thought that if we were able to include primary sources into our lessons and have students ask questions and be engaged with those primary sources, looking at different ones, comparing them, analyzing them, us starting with a compelling question was super important for us as well to really draw them into that lesson. And that compelling question's big. And we know that they have to learn a lot along the way to, at the end, be able to answer that compelling question. But that really drove that lesson. And by including those images and videos that had that primary sources in there, we thought that was really important.
And you really focused on the Indigenous communities and the Indigenous history because Arizona is so rich in those communities, and oftentimes it's not included in curriculum, right? So how did you go about saying, we really need to start thinking, especially in the early elementaries, right, about Indigenous histories and the community connections to their land and how land and people kind of shape each other?
It honestly all came from inquiry because we asked what do teachers need, and we listened, and the teachers said, we have a lot of things about Arizona's history, but sometimes things that are missing are specifically Indigenous voices from Arizona. And so we thought, okay, what can we do to help that? What can we do to fill that need? And when we saw our changing landscapes and we saw the including of America's plural and shared stories, already themes in the EAD, we thought this would be a really good time to be able to bring inquiry mixed in with the themes and be able to bring that to life for those third grade teachers because that was what they needed, and we heard them.
I love that you asked and then responded to what they said as opposed to just kind of, prescribing it on them. If a elementary teacher is listening and they are, kind of going back and forth about this EAD roadmap and really thinking like, well, this is just more that I would have to do, what is some advice that you would give to them?
I'm really glad you asked that question because we never want to have one more thing for a teacher to do. We want to show them that this is what you are doing. And if you're not doing this, try this because this will really solve a lot of things in one take. It will be able to allow you to incorporate inquiry, ELA, social studies, writing, reading, speaking, listening, civics education, and all in one. A lot of times people think that civics has to be taught separate or that social studies just as a whole has to be taught separate. That can never be. We can never really have that. When you think about even when you're teaching science, if you're not including the human perspectives in that, then it's a miss. So you want to make sure that when you are teaching social studies and when you are teaching the framework of the EAD and when you are including things like America's plural and shared story and the changing landscapes and the other themes and the wonderful driving questions that they have in there, that those things can be integrated in very easily. It is a really natural fit. And I love to continue to show teachers that because I think once teachers see that and once that kind of goes off, they are so pleasantly surprised that it's not one more thing and that really this is what connects everything, not separates it out. And so when they see that connection that's already made between our standards and the EAD and the ELA standards and the social studies, I think that really makes it easier for them because they see the way that everything connects and fits together and that they can't do one without the other, and it's not isolation. So I would say that connection is the most important thing for teachers to see, and it makes their job so much easier.
I love that. So like it's all connected. Even vice versa, right? If you're teaching social studies and aren't talking about science or math or I mean, ELA is the easiest thing because we're reading
Yes.
primary sources, but
Right.
all of those do connect. And the thing I really loved about your lesson is that really the students are doing the work, right? I think sometimes in social studies, we think like sage on the stage, teacher has to do everything. But when kids just sit and listen, they're not learning. If it's just to sit and get right. And so this
Mhm.
inquiry, that you have and the ability for students to ask the questions and to really do the work gets them involved and gets them really tied into their own learning. And the nice thing for the teacher is there's not a whole lot of development. You're showing kids, like, here's where you can find this information. And that's a really great question. Let's find out together. And you don't have to know everything.
Absolutely. It's so important. And I think when the teachers started including this and when they started implementing this lesson, that was one of the first things they said was, I feel like I'm working a lot less and I'm getting to know my students a lot more. And they were really able to personalize things. And we talk about going deeper with their learning. This was such a great lesson for them to do with the students to see how deep they can go when you are removed from being the sage on the stage. There's, of course, a time for direct instruction, and we have that built in. But we don't have to do that very long. We can move away from that and really let the students start to explore those primary sources, those videos, those stories. We do use picture books in there a lot. And then they are the ones that are asking the questions. And to be honest, some of those hard histories that happened during our history in Arizona, we were able to discuss in here in a very third grade way because it was student led. The students were asking about it. So we were able to talk about boarding schools and we were able to talk about why do certain Native American tribes live where they live in Arizona right now. And we were able to talk about reservations. And so it was really brought up, though, from the inquiry of the students and the different stories that they were reading and the voices they were hearing. So it was just really important that does come organically. It's in the lesson so that the teachers have what they need to teach it, but it also really does come from the students. And I think that teachers really enjoyed taking themselves out of that and taking themselves off of the stage and really letting the students engage with the curriculum and the resources that they had.
And teachers, you are the experts in your classroom. And I love that you said, talked about boarding schools, but in a third grade way, because
Yes.
that third grade teacher knows their class and knows the best way to answer that question in a manner that is appropriate for those students, right? Even if Maria and I were both teaching third grade at the same school, our two classrooms are different. We have a different set of students. And so that I think is where the teacher is that tie, is they are the experts in the kids that are in front of them and can really take that inquiry and make it appropriate for the kids that are in their classroom. And I think that's one of my favorite things about the EAD, right? And about inquiry is that it's not prescribed. This is not mandated. It allows you to do what you do best in your classroom and allows your kids to shine.
I agree 100% with that. Absolutely. And you can see that when you're walking in and they're doing the lessons and when they're teaching the lessons and when you're helping them with the lessons and you see that that really comes out and that shines and the teachers walk away feeling really good about how things went and really happy that multiple perspectives were included and that students' voices were heard and that they were able to study and research and really take control of their own learning in a personalized way. And it really just deepens everything for everybody. And I think the reflection piece of that is also really important so that we know where to go. And I like that, the lessons don't have to be one and done. We created it so it's units and it can keep going from there. We can alter it from there. And so I really like that part of it too, that flexibility for teachers to keep going with things that they know students want.
Yes. And listeners, we will have these lessons available on our website on the Center for Political Thought and Leadership, which is cptl.asu.edu. These will all be available. We want them widely used because I'm just so overjoyed, I guess, because all of the things that were created by Arizona teachers for Arizona teachers. And yes, I oversaw it. I didn't create any of it. I've been out of the classroom for a couple of years, and I don't get to work directly in classrooms anymore. And so that was something that was really important to us. Maria, It has been such a pleasure to talk to you today. Is there any final thoughts that you want to make sure that teachers hear, students, parents, our community, anything else that we want to make sure it gets out there?
Absolutely. I just want to say that please, teachers, make sure to keep that inquiry going in the hearts of those kids. They have those innate questions and they want to know. And when you give them those really rich sources to look through and those really cool things that they don't usually get to see on their video games, they do get interested and those questions come to life. And that really gives you that chance to personalize with your kids and find out what their interests are and go deeper and really make them citizens of our community. They'll have that knowledge to be able to stand up and ask questions. And I think that that's so important. It really just builds their self-efficacy when they feel that they understand how to ask questions and how to answer questions in an appropriate way. So it's in our standards and it's there. So just keep that connection going.
Thank you so much, Maria. I really appreciate your time today. I appreciate the writing. Please, listeners, go read it. The lesson will be available. And thank you. Thank you for bringing elementary social studies to the forefront.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you for joining us. Just wanted to give a heads up that you can find the Center for American Civics on all social media channels as ASU Civics. We love connecting with our community and sharing our thoughts on the issues that matter to us. So if you're interested in our content or just want to say hi, don't hesitate to give us a follow. Plus, we always include any relevant links in our podcast show notes, so be sure to check those out too. Thanks for being a part of our journey.